what is up, everyone? It's Jenny Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach, and you are listening to the LDS Mission Podcast, episode number 74, Love Your Body with Bridget Little. I'm Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, and whether you're preparing to serve a mission, currently serving, a returned missionary, or a missionary mama like me, I created this podcast just for you. Are you searching for epic confidence, ready to love yourself and to learn the how of doing hard things? Then let's go. I will help you step powerfully into your potential and never question your purpose again. It's time to embrace yourself, embrace your mission, embrace your life, and embrace what's next. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am thrilled today to share with you this episode and this conversation that I had with my friend Bridget Little. I have been getting lots of emails from preparing missionaries and returned missionaries who are trying to figure out how to love their bodies. And it's pretty evenly split, honestly, between girls and guys. And so I think we all understand, like, our bodies are, given to us by God, created by our heavenly parents. And I think we all logically understand that we're supposed to love them. But sometimes in the society that we live in, it's a little more complicated to actually put into practice. And so that is why I love this conversation with my friend, Bridget Little. I really actually did feel so many things as we were talking that rang true and really resonated with me. So I hope that you will find the same. So without further ado, here is my conversation with my friend Bridget Little. Hey everybody, I am so excited to have one of my friends, Bridget Little, here with me today. And we're going to have a really important conversation about our bodies and how to love our bodies. I've just gotten so many messages lately and emails about what happens if I gain weight on the mission. How do I handle thinking about my body while I'm out there and trying to serve? And even return missionaries, they say, I don't even like my body anymore. My body's so different now. So I'm super excited to have Bridget on here so that we can chat about some of this stuff. And I'm going to let her tell you about her journey and why she's good at talking about this. And so welcome, Bridget, and I'm so happy to have you. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Bridget Little. I live in Houston, Texas right now. I grew up in Southern California, and I am actually a convert to the church. So I joined the church as a youth. It has been a great blessing to my life. And so I have a great soft spot in my heart for missionaries. And we have 3 of our kids that have served missions, and yeah, big believer in the hard work that they do.
They do hard work, and a lot of it is like mental, right? And so I think that's where this like body image stuff comes into play, and emotional too. And so I'm really happy you're here to talk about that with us. So what is your background in helping people with maybe overeating and body image? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I spent 25 years of my life, primarily dedicated to trying to lose weight, starting from my early 20s until several years ago. Honestly, with the amount of mind space it took up, with the amount of my thoughts and my goals, it was really one of the primary focuses of my life and something that felt very important to me. And those efforts ultimately culminated in an eating disorder that I went through for about a year. I dealt with anorexia. And, it's been an interesting journey since then. When I first became a coach and I started working with clients, I was actually a little more in the weight loss space and trying to help people do it in what I saw were more healthy ways. And the more that I learned about body image, the more I learned about how our bodies actually work, my thoughts really started to shift, and realized that there is so much to this relationship with our bodies and where these thoughts come from, and really shifted away from the weight loss piece and toward just focusing on being in tune with our bodies and to working on that relationship and uncovering the real thoughts and desires that are behind the way we feel about our bodies. Because I was seeing clients that some of them were, very thin, some of them were larger, and they were all having the same drama, right? All
Yeah.
having the same thoughts, all having the same difficulties, and just realized that there was more at play there than just the shape of our bodies, and that you don't heal that relationship with your body by changing it. And so it's been a really beautiful journey to learn how to not only make peace with my own body, but to help guide other people through that same process. I had a really beautiful personal experience while I was going through all this, and was actually looking through Family Search and saw some pictures of my great grandmother. And this was a woman who lived through the Great Depression and two world wars, and
Mm.
lived in a very different food environment than I did, right? A lot of physical labor required, a lot of food rationing that happened, and there was no fast food available. And we were basically identical in these
Mm.
pictures.
Mm.
And just, realize that the role that genetics play in our bodies, and kind of had this moment of reckoning where I was like, okay, I can keep fighting my body for the rest of my life, or I can use this gift I've been given to live the life I want to live, and to live a really full and rich life, and have an influence for good on others, and to have joy in that. And so it really shifted my perspective on how I began to view my body and its purpose.
I love that so much. And one of the things that you said is, I feel like our brains, right, and our emotions, we only have so much energy to put towards something that we want to accomplish. And it sounds like for a long time you were putting so much energy into, thinking about your body and trying to change your body. And just when we tap into like the energy of love and acceptance for our bodies, how we can channel that love and acceptance and that energy allows us to just like think about something else and create something new in our lives and really enjoy the lives that we're living.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, awesome. Um, so I think we all like understand this from like a logical perspective that we should love our bodies.
Yeah.
And I had sent Bridget an email, saying, "Hey, you want to do this podcast?" And I said, "I have to be really honest with you. I don't even I don't always necessarily have the best relationship with my own body. Um I'm still learning how to love my body. So I wasn't even sure like which questions to ask or how to ask them. So I'm curious what you think, Bridget, about why is it so hard to love our bodies? We know
Yeah.
we're supposed to. And if we talk about like our relationship being kind of like our thoughts about something, our thoughts about our bodies that create that feeling of love. We're both LCS coaches, life coach, school coaches. Why is that so hard?
Yeah. The reason it's so hard is really fascinating to me. And I put a lot of study into this subject, actually, of why do we have the expectations we do about our bodies, and why are they so powerful? Because,
Mhm.
I've talked with so many people that intellectually they're like, okay, I get it, but I'm not feeling it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, I think primarily the reason is because what we think our body says about us and what it means about us, right? So
Mm.
we have these societal ideas that have been passed down to us through the years, and I'll give you examples of a few of these. We have, if you go all the way back to the 1500s, to the 1600s, to where the slave trade was expanding in Europe. And you had, this difference in the ways that the bodies from Africa looked from the way the European bodies looked. And
Mm.
at that time, there developed this kind of social pressure for white women to differentiate themselves and show that they were higher class than these slaves that they viewed as less than human, or
Mm.
as savages, right? And thinness became a way to differentiate that. Now we listen to that story and we think, okay, I don't believe any of that. And that's really gross anyway.
Right, right.
But we do believe in the leftovers of that, right? Which is thinness means discipline. And so if you're someone that's living in a larger body, you're thinking, okay, everyone's looking at me and thinking that I'm undisciplined, that I'm gluttonous, that I'm out of control.
Mhm.
And, we hear people say things like that about larger bodied people in society, and so, we have that leftover idea. We had during the 1800s, there was religious revival, and Joseph Smith talks about that, and how
Yeah.
he experienced that. And at that period of time, you also had an emphasis on how denying the physical appetites meant you were virtuous, right? We
Oh.
definitely see leftovers of that in our society,
Mm.
which, is really interesting to me. Um, and so there are a lot of these, I think, historical forces that are out of our awareness that we don't
Mhm.
realize the way that they've influenced our thoughts about our bodies, but that the leftovers of that are still with us on a daily basis.
Mm.
And, it's really fascinating to think about, we have a physical reminder that we wear every day that the Lord has given us that reminds us that our bodies and our spirits need to be constantly nourished, right?
Mm.
Provided that for us. And yet, when it comes up against, some of these societal ideals that we've been taught and what we think, being thin means or being larger means and the way people are going to view us, there's a disconnect right there. And those things are incongruous. And we feel this pressure that, if anybody's going to love me, if anybody's going to respect me, I need to show that I've got myself together and that shows in my physical appearance.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, so it's sort of like this cognitive dissonance between like, okay, we know we need to be nourished, we know, and yet we kind of have like this like underlying current or backstory that's been there for hundreds of years,
Right.
kind of telling us something else, and that they're that in order to be accepted or a certain, to be loved or accepted, that we have to look a certain way or be a certain way.
Yeah. And there's kind of a really fascinating progression that goes from there that I see time and time again with people that I work with. Because when we start thinking, okay, I need to look different if I'm going to be respected, if I'm going to be loved, or anything like that. And then we engage in behaviors to bring that about. So maybe that's, dieting, which I define as, deliberately eating less than you need in order to make yourself smaller, right? So
Okay.
we engage in that, which then sets off a biological response. Our bodies are beautifully designed to protect us from starvation, and
Yeah.
your hunger and satiety hormones that all adjust themselves to basically drive you to eat. And your metabolism will, go lower when you do that. And your body just basically pulls out all the stops to help you restore this weight you're losing, right? And that can even show up in the way that you're thinking about food. So then we think, okay, I'm obsessed with food, I'm out of control. And, then emotions of shame and all that get layered on top of this. And it becomes this really big, all consuming experience that is set off actually by the under eating.
Mhm.
And so, we tend to think, okay, I should be able to deal with all of this emotionally, when really, when your body isn't getting enough nourishment, that is typically kind of the catalyst that sets the whole process in motion.
Mm. Yeah, that's super interesting you say that, because what I have said to, a couple of my clients that are getting ready to leave, they're like, "What if I gain weight?" And I'm like, "Your body, like you are going to be going through like a very big change, a very big transformative, like when we talk about that lower brain, we're like thrusting you out of that cave
Yeah.
into like a situation that has like potential emotional danger." So I'm
Right.
like, doesn't it kind of make sense that your body would want to like, um, hold on to some fat for the in case there's a famine or, and being able to understand that it is more primal. It is, I mean, really, if we wanted to say like that was something God gave us
Yeah.
to be able to survive and to live in this world that we live in.
Yeah.
That's really good insight.
Yeah, and there's a couple of really interesting things that kind of go along with that. The two biggest determiners of whether you or not you gain weight and what size your body is are, first of all, genetics.
Mm,
We know from twin studies that even, twins that have the same genetics that are adopted and raised in separate households, you know, there's something crazy like a 90% correlation with,
mm.
what their body size ends up being.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's the strongest influencer. And we're not as in control of that as we're often led to believe that we are. You
Okay.
know, then the second biggest determiner of or predictor of whether or not people gain weight is actually intentional weight loss, which is so interesting.
Mm,
That ends up being one of the biggest predictors of weight gain. And so, if we can kind of sink into this idea of, there is a genetic blueprint that your body's going to have a spot that it's comfortable at, right? And attempts to, manipulate that by large margins, by and large don't work and can lead to a lot of consequences. And there are little ways that, it can adjust in those space. But if you look at, there's some really interesting studies of sumo wrestlers, actually.
okay.
And they, force feed themselves huge amounts of food to put on weight for sumo wrestling. And they find that when they retire, they typically shrink down to the size they were before, in accordance with their genetic blueprint. And
Mm,
similarly, people like me that have tried for years and years to lose weight will typically rebound back to that spot where their body is comfortable. And so, you may be in a situation. My daughter served in Brazil, and Brazilians love to feed you, and, they will welcome you into their homes. And
yeah.
that there is this emotional attachment to, okay, you need to eat my food so that I feel,
Right. Right.
connected, and she felt obligated to do that, and you may be in a situation like that, and there are various ways to manage that, but just know that your body, by and large, when you're out of that environment, is going to go back to what it's used to. It's going to do the thing it normally does, right?
Mm. Yeah, that was one of my questions for you because I find like I think one of the reasons this comes up, especially for the mission, right, is when we're just in our normal day-to-day lives, we kind of have some quote unquote control over like what goes in our mouths or how often we
Right.
exercise or how often we eat out or whatever. And on the mission, it feels like potentially that it's could be largely out of our control.
Right.
um, my son also, he served 7 months in Australia before COVID and then came home and then went back out to the New Hampshire mission. But yeah, he did put on a lot of weight, but he was in an area where they did like to feed him a bunch of food and you just had to eat it.
Right.
And I would be interested to hear like when you say there are some like um ways that you can sort of handle that or address that. Tell me like what kind of comes up or what you're thinking might be some strategies for that.
Yeah. So the number one tool that you can use is to make your body the authority of how much food is the right amount of food. And we're all born with this beautiful inborn system that, we know how much to eat, we know when to eat, we have ways our body signals us, and if anybody has ever tried to get a toddler to either eat something they don't want or to stop when they don't want,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about, right? We're born with this. And then that kind of gradually, a lot of us lose connection with that over the years, because maybe we're told, oh, I should be eating this amount of calories, or maybe I should, be following this plan, or maybe I should be eating this way. And we really externalize a lot of that knowledge, and we may be ignoring the internal signals to the point that we're not really hearing them anymore.
Yeah.
And so getting back in touch with those signals is one of the very best things you can do. And, it's interesting because it can be a lot like listening to the spirit. My
Oh, yeah.
experience with listening to the spirit has been, when I receive a prompting, if I'm not sure if that's coming from me or it's coming from the Lord, but it's telling me something good, I
Mhm.
typically do it, and that confirmation comes later, right? And my
Mhm.
sensitivity to those messages gets better and better.
Sure.
And I get really good at, discerning that voice of the Lord. And that it's similar with our bodies, as we respond to those cues, and as we learn to, when those subtle hunger cues are coming on, to respond to those, and when those subtle fullness cues are coming on, to know what those mean, those become clearer and clearer and clearer. And
Mm,
so, when we kind of develop that relationship of trust with our own bodies to where, we know, okay, I know how to feed myself, I know how much is enough. Then, when we're in situations where, I had a brother-in-law that was serving a mission. He got fed 3 Thanksgiving dinners, right?
right, right.
And he had this, he knew, okay, this is how I'm gonna feel, I'm gonna be sluggish, I'm gonna be uncomfortable if I stuff myself. And so he could pace himself, and my daughter in Brazil did the same thing. She knew that her hosts were going to want her to take a second helping, and that was an indicator that she enjoyed the meal and was important to them, and she wanted them to feel important and valued and know that she was grateful for that meal. So she would, take a very small first portion so she could go and get more. Or if you're making this many visits and people are going to be offering
Here's
you
some
food,
brownies. Here's some.
right? You
Yeah.
can kind of plan for that, if that makes sense, and know
Okay. Yeah.
this is where my body's going to feel good. And if I, am going past that point of comfortable fullness, I'm not going to be sluggish. I'm going to be sluggish. I'm not going to be thinking on my feet. I'm not going to feel good. So I'm going to, manage this in a way that's considerate of the people around me. And still I'm showing respect for my body and the signals that it's giving me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. It's sort of like, I like that you use the word trust
Yeah.
because I associate trust with love. And so, like just really like getting present with those signals, trusting your body. And then instead of people pleasing, like, yeah, I'll just eat that. I'm just going to eat that. I'm just going to eat that
Yeah.
because that's what these people want, but being really in tune with what you want and loving yourself and trusting yourself enough to either pace yourself or say, "Oh, no, thank you," or whatever.
Right.
I love
Right.
that. Okay, good. Um Okay, so but if we're going to trust ourselves and love ourselves, I think that's really where we got to start, right?
Yeah.
Is just uh and being able to like put that yourself as a priority in those types of situations and in stressful situations even. So how where do we even begin? Like how do we even start on this journey to love our bodies?
Yeah. I think, if we want to go back to the very beginning, I love thinking about the purpose of our bodies and the gift that they are. I think it was Boyd K. Packer that talked about his patriarchal blessing, where he was told that his body was the instrument of his mind and the foundation of his character. So
Mm,
if you think about, your body being the instrument of your mind, all the ideas that you have, all the things that you want to do, all of that gets sent to your body, and that's the way you do it. And I like to think about, okay, we in our pre-earth life, we didn't have these bodies, and why were we so excited? And I think sometimes we take for granted all of the things that it enables us to do, right?
mm,
I think about the ability to hug the people I love, or comfort a child that needs comfort, or even, that feeling of having put in some service and you're tired and you're exhausted and your muscles hurt, but you have
mhm.
that deep down satisfaction. Even the experience of our emotions, we know that when we feel emotions, our heart may be beating, or we may just, we feel physical sensations in our body. And think about the richness that it would take out of our emotional experiences if we didn't have a body.
Right.
Um, Even our experiences of feeling the spirit, it's often described as a burning in the bosom, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So, our bodies just enhance everything that we're able to do. It gives us opportunities to act that we didn't have before. It gives us opportunities to feel things that we didn't have before.
Mhm.
And, adds so much richness and so much dimension, and is such a huge gift. And nowhere in that gift does it say, but if you have a body that's this size, none of that counts, or none of that works, right?
Yeah.
But we get into these patterns of negativity with our
Yep.
bodies. Maybe we're not liking the way it looks. And so, we kind of develop this antagonistic relationship, or we're trying to control it, we're trying to manipulate it, we're trying to make it do what we want, instead of working with, the signals that it gives us and everything. And it kind of creates this adversarial relationship and kind of gets in the way of that love and appreciation.
I one of my favorite primary songs, this is what it aligns completely with what you're saying. There's a line in it and I won't remember like what page or anything. It's my heavenly Father loves me and I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it's the second verse that says he gave me my life, my mind, and my heart.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, like it literally blows my mind that that's all we need to create whatever we want. Like
Yeah.
even thinking about like you and I created this call where we can talk about this and then what we're creating will create something else for someone else and they'll go and do something else, but that's literally all we need is our minds and our hearts and our bodies.
Yeah.
And then we can create just like, and I like to think about it like just like our heavenly parents create. They
Right.
think about something, they fill it with love, and then they go make it happen.
Yeah. If I can go back for just a second to the
Yeah.
story of my great grandmother, and I mentioned a few of the difficult things she went through. And my grandfather lost his dad when he was 11 years old. So she was also a widow in the midst of all this. But my grandpa always talked about how absolutely happy and ideal his childhood was and how much he loved being in his home with his
Mm,
family.
mhm,
And so, I think about my great grandmother, in this larger body that looks exactly like mine.
mhm,
And that's not what her children were thinking about. They were thinking about how amazing she was to be around, how they felt when she was around them, the influence that she had on their hearts and their minds. And, I think that's so significant. I think sometimes we get so caught up in, you know, my body is if I want to do any of the things I want to do, if I want to accomplish any of the things I want to accomplish in my life, I have to first get this in this certain form, right? And then I
right.
can go do all the things I want to do instead of saying, okay, this is the body I have. And I can just actually go directly to living the life I want to live and having the kind of influence that I want to have with the body that I've been given. So,
So powerful. I love that so much. So when I think about what I've kind of noticed actually is that, and you can tell me, I might be totally wrong, but what I've kind of observed is that when a lot of people get stressed, they lose a ton of weight.
yeah.
I feel like for me, when I get stressed, I have a tendency to go towards food as a way to sort of
Yeah.
like numb emotion or numb stress. And the way that I was taught and the way you were taught is like that we call that maybe like a buffer to sort of like put a little like padding around the emotion so that it doesn't feel as intense to us. But is that still how you think about it? Do you still think about overeating as a buffer? And what tips do you have? Because I know because I talk to these missionaries, they're stressed, they're
Yeah.
worried, they feel pressure, they feel overwhelmed to be a certain way and to meet their goals. And then when they get home, it's sort of the same feeling, but a different flavor. Like I gotta show up, I gotta be this certain way, I gotta live up to my potential. So tell me what you think about overeating, and I just want to hear all of your wisdom.
Yeah, I actually teach this a little bit differently. And there's some elements that are the same and some are different, but I don't think you can completely separate it from the biology.
Okay.
Um, and, we talked a little bit about how restricting food can actually lead to a kind of a compensation response, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we define what overeating really is,
Mm,
because we tend to think, okay, if I'm not as thin as I think I should be, then I'm overeating. And we define it that way when that may not be true. Your body may be genetically designed to be a different weight, and it's not evidence that you're overeating at all. Just
okay.
like
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
there are thin people that overeat, and, if that result doesn't show up in their body either.
Mm,
And so, I think it's important to define overeating as when we're overriding those signals that our body is giving us, right?
okay. Okay.
And when
Yeah.
we're eating past comfortable fullness and we're seeing consequences of that. And so, a lot of times what we And I mentioned a little bit about how when we have one of those compensatory eating episodes where maybe we haven't been eating enough and then our body floods our
Mhm.
mind with all these hormones and we eat a lot, in compensation to try to make that up, then we have shame that layers, we have regret that layers on top of that. And it becomes a very emotional situation that then makes us want to eat more to soothe it, right?
Right.
And so I think it's really important to kind of get the biology worked out first and make sure we're adequately nourished before we start working on emotional eating, right?
Mm.
And then what I think is really valuable is, I never tell anybody I work with that they're not allowed to eat in response to emotion, because the truth is that it does work. It
It
can,
works.
right?
Yes,
If it
yes.
didn't, you wouldn't do it. And so I usually, tell people, okay, take that tool and stick it in your toolbox, but let's make sure it's not the only tool that's there, right? What are other ways that you can respond to emotion? And sometimes that's just taking a minute to process the emotion and letting that move through you and having that experience. You know,
Mhm.
sometimes what might help you is actually taking a nap. You might be exhausted,
Mhm.
or you may need to spend some time talking with a friend or a companion or somebody and have that social connection. And so I think if we can put emotional eating in the toolbox and let it be there, but not, put all these prohibitions on it. And then, when we're in this situation where we're feeling all this emotion, we can ask ourselves the question, what's going to help me most right now?
Mm.
What would be best for me at this moment? And we can choose that solution and choose that tool that addresses those emotions that we're feeling. I had a client once that was working toward a deadline. She had a really stressful, demanding job. And
Mhm.
she's like,
Mhm.
I can't go for a walk. I can't sit and process emotion right now. I don't have time, but I can have a snack and it gets me through the
Yeah.
workday and helps abate that stress. And that's totally valid.
Right.
That is an okay tool to use, but it kind of loses that, just kind of that all consuming power over us when we're not placing so much, burden on it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what I like about what you're saying is that instead of what I kind of think is some of the shame, right, is going to come from thoughts like, oh, all of a sudden we've eaten an entire bag of cookies. It was sort of
Mhm.
unconscious. And I think a thought might be like, I'm out of control, or I maybe I don't love my body. If I loved my body, then I wouldn't have done that. And right. And all of that. But when we become like bring some awareness to it and we become super intentional, then that is a form of showing love. Like, okay, so this is super stressful. Which of these coping tools
Yeah,
or strategies do I want to use? And sometimes it's crumble cookies. Like it's
right.
just going to be sometimes. And that's totally fine. But I think even just that intentionality is going to change the energy behind it.
Yeah.
Right. And then we won't have to layer on that shame. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and there's a really fascinating study that I want to mention, and it was actually a study on sugar addiction, and they used rats. With rats aren't humans, but there's some things we can learn
Hmm.
there. But they had containers of sugar water and regular water in these rats' cages,
Mm.
and the people that were crafting this study had some of the rats that they restricted from food beforehand and some that they didn't. And
Okay.
the ones that had their food restricted ahead of time showed addictive behavior toward the sugar water, right?
Mm.
And the ones that hadn't had that experience in the past and hadn't had their food restricted, the sugar water was just, it was no big deal. It was like regular water, right? And so
Mm.
they partake of it a little bit and then they wouldn't, and they'd have some of the regular, and they didn't display any of that addictive behavior. So, a lot of times when I have a client that they're like, I can't trust myself with food, I can't, I'm out of control if I let myself eat
Mhm.
any of this, or if I keep this in the house, I'm just going to plow through all of it.
Mhm.
And, that is evidence of physical or mental restriction when it comes to food.
Deprivation or restriction.
Um,
Yeah.
when there are emotional tools in the toolbox and when the body is adequately nourished without that restriction, there really is no such thing as out of control eating. I think
Mm,
those things level out and food becomes food. It
mm,
becomes
mhm. Okay.
something that you could take or leave, right?
Right. Okay, good. Bridget, I love everything that we've talked about and um kind of these concepts and stuff. But I can kind of hear the listeners being like, okay, so what do I do? Right? Like
Yeah.
we've kind of talked about how we can think about our bodies and how we can feel about our bodies. Um, but if you were to offer some like real like action oriented like to-dos, where do we start to create this relationship to get back into like um cueing into our bodies and to take the shame out of using sometimes food as a tool, as a coping
Yeah.
mechanism without layering all this judgment and shame on top of it.
Yeah. I think there are a couple things that, can be useful in the moment. And I think first, with that physical component, you become the authority of when and how much you need to eat. Nobody else is going to be able to determine that better than you can.
Hmm.
And so, that may involve, just really getting familiar with how your body signals to you that it's hungry. So paying attention to those kind of things. Do you get a headache? Does your stomach rumble? Do you start thinking about food a lot? Do
Hmm.
you start to feel a little bit weak? All of those things can be manifestations of physical hunger. And so if you can start recognizing and responding to those,
Hmm.
that is a great first step, because like I mentioned, you'll get better and better at tuning in to
Hmm.
those.
Hmm.
And, sometimes pausing in the middle of a meal and just evaluating how you're feeling at the moment. You have no obligation to stop if you want to continue, but just checking in to say, okay, how am I feeling right now? Am I starting to feel satisfied? Am I, starting to feel a little too much? But I think, intentionally taking those pauses and intentionally paying attention to that physical experience and knowing that your body is the authority for
Mm.
what you need. That's the first step, and then I think being aware of our thoughts about our bodies. So, we've all had those experiences where we kind of find ourselves in a body image crisis, and we're feeling really bad about ourselves. And a lot of times if we can just ask ourselves the question, what is it that I really want right now? Am I wanting acceptance? Am I wanting love? Am I, what is it that I'm thinking my body has to deliver for me at this moment?
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
think recognizing, okay, that's the thing I really want more than I want to look a certain way. I'm thinking that looking a certain way gives me this, right?
Gives you that.
So
Yeah.
if we can cue into what that thing is,
Mhm.
then we can kind of put our focus directly there, right?
Mhm.
Another thing I like to do for kind of those in the moment things. So, maybe I'm at the grocery store and I haven't done my hair and I'm not dressed nice, and I'm
Right,
just kind
right.
of feeling down about myself and my appearance. We've all had those moments. But sometimes I just think, okay, what is my purpose and not my cosmic eternal purpose? What is my purpose right now? I'm here in this store to gather food for my family. I'm not here to decorate the store and be an ornament.
Mhm.
How is my body doing at the task that
Mm.
I'm do? And so, usually I'm grabbing things off the shelf just fine, and
Yeah.
it's not a problem. And my purpose was never to ornament the space that I was in.
Mhm.
But sometimes that's just a quick tool that we can use to pull ourselves back to center and
Mm.
say, what am I here to do right now? And especially with a missionary, I am here to share the light of Christ and the story of the gospel with these people that I'm serving.
Mhm. Yeah.
How is my body enabling me to do that right now?
Right. And what's interesting about the three things that you just shared is they all require um presence
Yeah,
and all require us to go inside for our own, like to check in with ourselves.
right.
And that can be tough, I think, on a mission, especially we get this mindset where it's like it's all about them, it's all about these people, and how can I help those people, and how can I help those people? But if we can, take that time to check in with us, like where am I at during this meal, or check in with those hunger signals, um And also I love this idea. Like I'm in the grocery store, like what's my purpose here? Like why am I here? How is my body helping me and serving me in this moment? I really like that because it's not about the past, like the weight that we were before we left, or the weight that we're
Right.
going to be when we get home, or the weight we're going to be 10 years from now. It's like experiencing our bodies. I'm just thinking about this out loud right now, but experiencing our bodies and loving our bodies happens in the present moment.
Right. And I love, coming back to that quote from Elder Packer, if we can think of our bodies as the instrument of our minds, right? And of our
Mm,
spirits. And it is the thing that enables us to do and fulfill all of those desires of our heart, right?
mhm.
And, sometimes if we can focus on that element of our body, we can get a little bit out of the, I have to meet these certain beauty standards. It's important for me to, like I said,
Mhm.
decorate the space. It can
Right.
kind of just help us recenter on, okay, why do I have this body in the first place? And what does it help me do?
So good. Well, Bridget, anything else that we didn't cover that you feel like we want our missionaries and our return missionaries to know? Anything come up?
I love there is a quote from Sister Hinckley, and let me see if I can grab this real quick. I love this, and I think she encapsulates this idea so well. She says, I don't want to drive up to the pearly gates in a shiny sports car, wearing beautifully tailored clothes, my hair expertly coiffed with long, perfectly manicured fingernails. I want to drive up in a station wagon that has mud on the wheels from taking kids to scout camp. I want to be there with grass stains on my shoes from mowing Sister Shank's lawn. I want to be there with a smudge of peanut butter on my shirt from making sandwiches for a sick neighbor's children. I want to be there with a little dirt under my fingernails from helping to weed someone's garden. I want to be there with children's sticky kisses on my cheeks and the tears of a friend on my shoulder. I want the Lord to know I was really here and that I really lived. And I tear up every time I hear this quote because I think, we our bodies enable us to do so much. They enable us to serve and to experience life so richly. And the evidence of that living is going to show, right?
Mm,
There are going to be changes that occur to our body over time. And the consequences of all those experiences we have are
mhm,
going to show. But do we see that as evidence of having lived? And, I love that idea that, our bodies really do tell the story of
mm.
our lives. And we're not, the Lord never said, I want you to bring this body back looking exactly like it did, like your Stinky Pete mint in the box from Toy Story. That's not what he told us. We can be more like the Velveteen Rabbit, that are the wear and tear and all of the things that happen can be evidence of a life well lived, and can be evidence that we've used this body for all of the things that we intended to use it for.
Mm. That's beautiful. I love that so much. That gives me chills too. That was awesome. Well, Bridget, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all of your wisdom. How can people find you? Like, how can they work with you? Tell
Yeah,
us
so
about location.
I have a website at bridgetlittlecoaching.com, and I am also on Facebook and Instagram at the same place, Bridget Little Coaching. I see clients by the session. So if somebody wanted to work with me for one session or continually, they don't have to buy a package or do anything like that. We just meet over Zoom and talk through any individual issues they may be having, and how to apply some of these principles.
Oh, so good. Everyone, go get a session with Bridget. That's awesome. I love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and for all of your wisdom. And thank you for helping us kind of sort through some of this stuff that often can feel a little bit complicated. Appreciate all of your wisdom and love.
My pleasure.
Serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can present a unique set of challenges. And many of those challenges you might not even see coming. So you're going to want a unique set of solutions. It's easier than you think to overcome worry and anxiety, serve the successful mission you've always dreamed of, and navigate your post-mission experience with confidence. That is why I created some amazing free goodies that I'm sharing in my show notes. Maybe you'll want to grab the free training for preparing missionaries, my video course for RMs, or maybe you and I should hop on a free strategy call. If you're ready to take your preparedness to serve or your preparedness to come home to the next level, then go grab one of those freebies. And in the meantime, no matter which part of the mission experience you are involved in, just know that Jenny, the LDS mission coach, is thinking about you every single day.